Countrywide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lamp.
Well, Mike Butterick, Associate Ag Minister, was recently at the Quarry Conference and has been discussing aggregate rules, quarrying, a whole lot of topics actually that might seem pretty boring. But when you're farming, they're not that boring because they can actually cause quite a bit of problems. G'day, Mike. Welcome to the show, mate. Appreciate your time. So what's going on here? We've seen RMA changes. These are proposed standards changes. What's happening?
Yeah, that's right, Andy. And it was great to be at that quarrying conference, about 750 delegates, and they even had some proper toys outside, big dump trucks, big diggers. So that was like being died and gone to heaven, actually, being surrounded with all that stuff. But yeah, look, I guess the first, to your point, Andy, is aggregate and access to rivers. I mean, aggregate supply. They're the cornerstone of our infrastructure, whether it's our roads, our buildings and all the rest of it. And, really, really important that we do have access to that. And so I got the opportunity to just make, have a welcoming speech there. But what I could say is that, following the RMA, and it's a sequencing challenge that we have, we need the RMA to land, and then we need standards and directions as well. So that a priority with Minister Bishop and National League Government in the next election will be to, and on behalf of the industry, thanks to the advocacy from the industry, will be to prioritise a national standard for quarry management and extraction from rivers.
So why does there need to be a national standard then? What have we got currently?
A bucket load of standards, as you're probably well aware of, Andy. Currently in New Zealand, there's 1,175 different planning zones. And, so effectively there's an arbitrary or invisible line that someone's drawn at a point in time, and there's different rules the minute you step over that line. And then, the next line is a different set of rules. So what we need is some consistency right around the country.
Okay, so what is that? What sort of problems is that causing? Does that mean that we cannot extract aggregate for quarrying needs, or we can't clean the rivers?
Well, Andy, to be honest, I mean there's a little bit of both here, because look, the reality is if you don't clean, the material comes out of the hills as it has always done, and it will continue to do so, and it builds up in the rivers. If you don't do that, effectively the river starts getting higher than the land beside it, and the point in time in a rain event, you'll end up, the river will, build a new path. And that's how we ended up with floodplains up and down the length of the country. So it's about managing the river and protecting the infrastructure that's beside it, whether it's farms, whether it's businesses, or whether it's houses and towns. And then also too, the aggregate is critical in terms of our infrastructure needs that we have as a country. So, we've got to get a sustainable way, while also protecting the environment, to get it out that's consistent across the country.
Okay. Just reading the draft, though, it says councils must ignore landscape effects, land values and most traffic impacts. That's quite a significant change, isn't it? Why was it important that those were removed? Because on the face of it, you could look at it and go, I don't want someone to build a massive quarry next door to me, or I don't want hundreds of traffic movements of trucks, messing up my road. That's quite significant, I would have thought.
Yeah, you're right, Andy, but look, the reality is at the end of the day, it's got to come from somewhere, right? And it's a little bit like the argument about, solar farms and wind turbines and all the rest of it. People go, yep, absolutely great idea, until it's coming in beside me. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, I don't want that. So, look, I have had, people that I know have, extracting metal or boulders out of like a land quarry, if you like. And because it's been too difficult to get into a river. And, they're due to start at, say, for example, 7 o'clock in the morning. They're there 1 minute before 7, and then they get complaints and all the rest of it. And then there's, there's dust on the road. And it's like, hang on, for goodness sake, you're living on a gravel road. Of course, there's going to be dust. So it just becomes very, very difficult and challenging for these people to maintain a consent, or to even bother applying for one. And, of course, then what that means is we start dragging gravel the length of the country, and all that means is their roads cost more.
Well, we certainly don't want to see that. But just coming back to balancing environmental protections here, environmental advocates will say that these regulations prevail over the NES for Freshwater 2020. The draft mentions adherence to water conservation orders, environmental management plans. But how do we ensure the public, or how do you ensure the public, you're not completely stripping away protections, natural river flows, habitats? Because I think we end up with the thin end of the wedge at times, and it all seems like this is a good idea. I get the whole pendulum thing, Mike, but are we just in danger of going back a bit far here, maybe?
Well, look, I think the reality is, Andy, it's not about stripping the rivers, right? It is about, look, the reality is that material comes down from the main ranges, and it will keep coming down so long, forever. And so that's the reality. If you do not do anything, the significant risk to infrastructure beside riverways. And we've built towns and businesses and factories and the like right beside rivers. And so it is about managing that, because if you don't, quite simply, it'll leap out and forge a new path. And that will get pretty untidy. And then in terms of, there is also a point where you can extract too much from a river potentially, and then effectively undermine infrastructure such as bridges, and we don't want that to happen either. So it is about a balance, but it is about looking to utilise that material that comes down out of our mountain ranges, and that we can actually utilise.
Yeah, there's no shortage of it where I am here on the west coast. I can tell you, if we can get some of that, we'd be to the right place at the right time. The other thing that I'm just intrigued at, Mike, is we know that. And you were at the Quarrying Association conference. They would have been very happy. This commercial operators and rural councils, but the draft specifically excludes farm and forestry quarries where farmers extract gravel on their own properties. Is this excluding? Why are farmers and forestries? Why are they excluded out of this? Because if you're on, like when I was farming, we needed to put the digger in the river. We had to keep our ford clear, our culvert clear, our bridges clear, right? Are you just pandering to the commercial operators here?
No, and look, to your point, Andy, I think a lot of cockies, if you had a good bit of red metal or something on your farm, you did go and shovel a bit of that in the back of the trailer and go and put it over your tracks and things like that. So, excuse me. So look, I'm not 100% over the detail of that one, but I think the key bit is that a priority for us as government to get a national standard for that extraction as well, and also looking at what we can make a permitted activity as well.
All right. Well, I know there will be a lot of people who are quite happy about this because it has been a level of frustration. Mike, how much of it, and I know we just touched on the start of the interview, but how much of these infrastructure damage are we seeing around the country in our rural areas, particularly with bridges, that flood damage, that mitigation that because we've been excluded from the gravel extraction? I actually hear it a lot. I do hear it. Almost every time there's a flood, someone will go, "Look, we couldn't keep the riverbank clear. The bridge is gone because of X." Does that actually happen?
Yeah, look, I think there's probably a few things that happen there, Andy. And actually, I just spent all yesterday down in South Wairarapa with Sarah Donaldson from the Rural Support Trust, looking at some of the damage from that flood event a few weeks ago. Both on farm and in the rivers. So I think there's a few things there. Is number one, we're having a bucket load of rain as well, like huge amounts of rain, half a metre of rain. There's always going to be a degree of damage there, but there's no doubt about it. The river has been jumping out and damaging infrastructure beside it, and that's not just limited, to your point, to South Wairarapa. We saw it in the red weather event in mid-Canterbury. That was actually on my brother's farm, where it breached up in the North Branch of Ashburton and went right down through his farm. And we are seeing it in a number of places up and down the length of the country. And that is a common narrative that we do hear from people, is that the riverbed's been getting too high and we haven't been managing the amount of metal in the river. Yep.
And that's because the rules have been so prescriptive for councils to get a consent, and so this is potentially, if this goes through, it's going to give some redress there. What is the time frame for this, Mike?
Look, it's we've got to get back into government. It's a small matter. Yeah, that's right. And you know what you have to do for that to happen, Andy, don't you? So,
I'm supposed to be apolitical.
I'm not putting words in your mouth, Andy.
No, of course
No,
you're
so
not.
look, it is, we're dealing with really complicated legislation. And, as I know as people are frustrated and they'd like us to be able to, make it happen straight away, but it is complicated and you do need to get it right because the risk is if you try and do it in a hurry, you'll just end up with stuff that's not going to last over time. So it is about trying to get it right. So it will take a little bit of time.
All right, Mike Butterick, Associate Ag Minister. Really appreciate your time on the show today, mate. You have a good one. We'll be back in touch. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Countrywide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perry-Lamp.